This case takes place in Nevada, USA on the 31st of July 2021. Roy Jaggers was a 27-year-old man who lived in Las Vegas. He was a keen martial artist, having obtained a black belt and had even won a number of tournaments. He was also a musician and played the saxophone. Roy worked as an electrician in Las Vegas, but due to recent circumstances, he lost some of his regular work, so he had to turn to other ways to make ends meet. He found work at a convenience store and was living at home to help care for his mother. The neighbour of Roy's mother was a 27-year-old woman named Heather Pate. Heather had 2 children and would occasionally ask Roy to babysit them. Because Roy was in need of extra work, he was always happy to oblige, but this wasn't something that was too frequent. On the 31st of July 2021, Roy made a phone call to his father, and the two had a quick chat about how they were both doing. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. 2 hours after this phone call had taken place, Roy was contacted by Heather and told to come over to her house to speak. Upon entering Heather's home, he was confronted by Heather and her boyfriend, 36-year-old Kevin Dent. Kevin had been convicted for harming a child, battery, and resisting a police officer with a firearm. He got released from prison earlier in 2021. Heather and Kevin both accused Roy of harming her children whilst he was babysitting, and had lured him to the house to attack him. Caught off guard, Roy was viciously beaten by Kevin. The two then handcuffed Roy and continued to beat him. As this was happening, it is believed that Heather's 2 children, aged 3 and 4, witnessed Kevin attack Roy. Whilst the beating was taking place, Heather had pulled out a recording device and began to film what was happening to Roy. This footage would later be found, and her children could be seen in the background. They then picked Roy up whilst he was still handcuffed and forced him into the back of the car. Heather then contacted her former boyfriend, 37-year-old Brad Men. Heather and Kevin drove to a shooting range where Brad was. They picked him up, drove to a secluded part of the desert, and began some of the most horrific acts of torture that I have ever heard. The 3, totally secluded with Roy, used a knife, baton, ice pick, and axe to inflict as much pain upon Roy as possible. For numerous hours, the 3 tortured Roy by stabbing him, cutting him, and beating him with a baton. In what would have been extreme excruciating pain, the 3 began to use a blowtorch. They used the intense heat of the flame to destroy large parts of his skin all over his body. Then, the 3 later drove Roy approximately 25 miles away to Cathedral Canyon. There, they stripped Roy naked and forced him to walk over the edge. He fell to the bottom of the canyon, but he was still alive. It was at this point that Brad retrieved his shotgun and shot Roy multiple times, finally ending his life. The following day, on the 1st of August, around 6:20 AM, Roy's body was discovered in Cathedral Canyon. A man had been sleeping in his car when he heard gunshots the night before. The man stayed in his car until sunrise. When the sun came up, he walked towards where the gunshot was heard. As he got closer, he saw what looked like a naked and bloody body with 2 men standing near it. He called 911 after the 2 men drove away. The police arrived and were met with the truly gruesome scene. Roy was able to be identified by his fingerprints, and his body was taken away for an autopsy. Roy had multiple injuries all over his body, multiple burns, stab wounds, and blunt force trauma to his head. The coroner was able to determine that the cause of death was from the shotgun wounds. 30 pellets were found inside his body. Within 36 hours from that initial call from the man, the police tracked down Heather, her boyfriend Kevin, and her former boyfriend Brad Men. The 3 were charged with kidnapping, battery, and murder. After being arrested, Brad told the police where they could find the shotgun that he had used to kill Roy. Shortly after, a friend of Brad's came forward to the police. This person stated that in the early hours of the 1st of August, Brad called him and asked for help. Brad told this friend, "We caught a child predator and they wanted to teach him a lesson. "We beat him, but I think we've gone too far." This friend said that he met with Brad, Heather and Kevin at Cathedral Canyon that morning, as he didn't realize that they had actually killed someone. He assumed that Roy was just badly beaten. The three men went to the canyon floor whilst Heather waited in her car. This friend said, "They were freaking out, trying to figure out what to do with the body. I got angry because the kid was dead and I was told he wasn't," and went on to explain that he went to the canyon with intentions to help Roy and walked away after he realized he was dead. This friend of Brad's then said that Brad had given him a toolbox containing a hammer and 2 trash bags, and that he had asked him to dispose of the items, to which he did. Brad also asked him to dispose of the shotgun, but they declined to do so. One of Heather's friends named Brandon also came forward. He stated that on the 31st of July, Heather had contacted him and asked if he was free to babysit her children for the night, as there had been some kind of emergency. He said yes and made his way over to her house. Although, upon entering the home, Brandon found Roy lying on the ground, handcuffed and beaten. Despite seeing such a sight, he did nothing to help Roy and made no calls to the authorities. The court proceedings for this case have begun. However, there seems to be somewhat of a delay. The trial was supposed to happen at the end of 2022, but it didn't happen. From what I have seen, the trial could take place in May of 2023 if there are no further delays. The state currently has a shortage of public defenders, which is most likely the issue for the case being postponed. The prosecution team were going to push for the death penalty for Brad in particular, although this would drag the trial on for potentially years and would be incredibly hard to do. The prosecution said, "This is something that would take decades and cost the county millions of dollars. There is a high emotional cost for the family and a big economic cost to the county, and executions are very rare in the county." The prosecutor went on to say that around 64 inmates are on death row in Nevada right now, and one of them has been there since 1979. The last execution in Nevada was in 2006. In the court proceedings so far, Roy's family have listened to hours of testimony. Roy's mother Catherine took to the stand and was asked if she had seen any of the images of her son after he had been killed. Catherine had indeed seen what those three did to her son, and she was shown another photograph. However, the photograph that was shown in court was far more graphic. It's reported that Catherine gasped and retched upon seeing the image, and said, "That's my baby." Roy's parents have both said that their son was a kind man who would never hurt anyone. Catherine said, "I know exactly what he's like, what he's capable of, and what he's not capable of," and went on to say, "He had a real excitement, he loved things, and he loved people. He used to come into my room and sit on the edge of my bed, and we would just sit and talk for hours, and I miss that so much." There is currently a GoFundMe for Roy's mother, Catherine. She is disabled and wants to attend every day of the trial, but with her current financial situation and her disability, this will be made much harder. If you are in a position to help and want to do so, a link will be pinned in the comments. I was very surprised to stumble upon the murder of Roy. The case certainly ranks as one of the most horrific I have ever come across, yet I had heard nothing about it. What is very important to highlight, and what I want to reiterate, is that Heather's boyfriend, Kevin Dent, had previously been found guilty of harming a child. Many have speculated that it's possible, if not likely, that he was the one who harmed the children and tried to pass on the blame to Roy. As of right now at least, there is no evidence to suggest that Roy did anything to harm Heather's children.